All right, guys, this is it. Our final chapter of The Littles and the Lost Children, chapter 14. Can you believe it? We've gotten through 2 entire books during our entire school closure. You guys have done an awesome job with this. So let's see how this all ends. Will Winky and Tip ever find their parents on Smoke Mountain? We're about to find out. We have our final guest reader. And our guest reader today is a special one. This person is probably the most important person in our entire district. She is definitely the most popular person on Twitter in our district. And she's the one that makes the biggest decision as to whether or not we have snow days. Do you have any idea who it could be? You're about to find out in chapter 14, our final chapter. The blue and white glider flew southwest toward the town dump. Mayor Clutter and Mr. Penny are sure going to be glad to see you two kids, said Cousin Dinky, who was piloting the aircraft from the front cockpit. No answer came from Winky and Tip in the rear seat. You had quite an adventure to tell the other kids, Cousin Dinky went on. Still no answer. Someday you'll realize that Major Nick is doing the right thing, sending you back to Trash City, said Cousin Dinky. Silence. Cousin Dinky turned around in the cockpit and looked back at Winky and Tip. You kids really believe in that black bird, don't you, he said. The children nodded silently. Okay, said Cousin Dinky. I'm going to do something I shouldn't, just to prove to you you're wrong. Do you mean, said Winky, you're going to fly us to the top of Smoke Mountain, finished Tip? Cousin Dinky pointed to the clouds. You're in luck. They're perfect for some high flying, he said. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. Hooray for Cousin Dinky, shouted Tip. Those clouds are like a sign from the heaven, Cousin Dinky went on. I can't resist it. Oh, Dinky, said Winky, you're wonderful. You can forget that wonderful stuff, said Cousin Dinky. When you see that your dreams are all wrong, you won't think it's so wonderful. The tiny pilot steered the nick of time into some warm rising air. He knew it would carry them to the top of Smoke Mountain. They rode the rising current of warm air, circling ever so slowly, going higher and higher. Winky and Tip looked down on the big valley below. The rivers, streams, fields, and rooftops looked toy-like to them. Then when the glider was almost to the top of Smoke Mountain, it shuddered and nosed downward toward the valley. Winky saw the town dump and the smoke where the garbage was burning. We've lost the hot air, said Cousin Dinky. He worked at the controls, trying to keep the glider from falling further. Suddenly, Cousin Dinky found another column of rising hot air. This time they rose even higher into the sky. Then he spotted a rocky ledge and an overhanging rock. It looked like the place where he'd been told that the hill tinies lived. Cousin Dinky flew in and landed on the ledge. Without warning, a bobcat bounded out of a rock cave. With one swipe of its paw, the glider was knocked off the ledge. The craft spiraled downward. Cousin Dinky got control of it again. There seemed to be no damage to the aircraft. It's just like my dream, said Winky. I feel funny. They flew along the crest of the mountain until Tip spotted another ledge. Over there, he called out and pointed. Winky gasped. I think that looks like our home that I saw in my dreams, she shouted. Get ready for bad news, said Cousin Dinky as he landed on the rocky ledge. The glider was immediately surrounded by a crowd of tiny people. They seemed to come right out of the rocks that were scattered about. A closer look showed there were mud-colored houses tucked away among the rocks. Cousin Dinky stood up on his cockpit seat. By this time, the crowd of hill tinies were gathered close up to the glider. They were touching it and talking excitedly to each other. Cousin Dinky held up both hands and shouted, Hello! Hello! Some of the crowd shouted back. Cousin Dinky turned to Winky and Tip. Now you'll see how wrong your dreams and imagination are, he said. Then he spoke to the crowd. We've flown up from the big valley to find out if there's anyone among you who flies around on a big black bird. All right, Dr. Gifford, take it away.
A man in the crowd raised his hand. Cousin Dinky didn't notice him. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, "but it's important for these children to learn once and for all that there are no such people." The crowd laughed. The glider pilot turned to Winky and Tip. "There, you see," he said. "The whole idea of flying on a bird is so ridiculous. These people think it's funny." "Hold on there, sir," said the man whose hand had raised. "You've found the person you're looking for. My name is Len Smallfry." He motioned to a woman standing beside him. "This is my wife, Lynn Smallfry. We do some traveling on a black bird." "Who are you, sir, and what do you want with us?" For a moment, Cousin Dinky was speechless. Winky and Tip began to climb out of the glider.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gifford, for helping us out on our final chapter. But by now, Cousin Dinky was laughing. He jumped down from the glider and shook Father Len's hand. "I can't believe you actually fly on a bird. I'm amazed." Winky walked up to the small fries. "Did you lose 2 children in the Big Valley town dump 7 years ago?" she asked. Father Len looked searchingly at Winky. "Yes, we did, but how did you know that?" "You're our parents," said Tip. "We were found in the dump 7 years ago by the trash tinies." "No," said Father Len. "They're dead. You can't be. Gone for 7 years now. You're mistaken. It can't be." He stood staring at Winky and Tip, looking like a man who had the wind knocked out of him. Tears were rolling down Mother Len's face. "Oh, Lenny," she cried, "look at them. Can't you see they're our children?" Just then, the big black raven came sailing into land on the rocky ledge. "It's Sable," gasped Winky. "How'd you know her name?" Tip asked. "I just remembered," said Winky. She walked slowly toward the big bird. "Croak," said the raven. "Watch out, children," cried Father Len. "That's her warning." But when Winky and Tip ran up to her, Sable spread her wings around them. Look at that. Winky and Tip finally made their way home. "It's true," said Father Len, hugging his wife. "Our children have returned. It's unbelievable, like a dream." "It was all a terrible mistake," said Cousin Dinky, "and your remarkable children figured out what really happened. It wasn't the way you thought. It wasn't the way the trash tinies thought either. A sad mistake, but it's all over now, thank God." There was great excitement among the hill tinies over the return of Winky and Tip. Everybody had to shake their hands and give them welcoming hugs. After they had all calmed down, questions were answered and explanations given. At last, everyone understood what had happened 7 years ago at the town dump. Winky and Tip were taken to their home for a reunion with all of their relatives. To their surprise, they were introduced to 7-year-old twin children of Mother and Father Smallfry, and to their further surprise, they learned they were cousins and not twins. "It's kind of crazy, though," said Father Len. "Winky looks like my sister, Maddie, who was Tip's mother." "I know," said Mother Len, "and Tip looks like you." "That's the way it is in families," said Granddad Fry, shaking his head and looking at Grandmom Fry. "I know," said the old lady. "It's a wondrous thing." Before leaving, Cousin Dinky took everyone for a ride in his glider. As he took off to return to the Big Valley, Winky and Tip flew a little way with him aboard the big raven. "I'll tell everyone in Trash City what happened," Cousin Dinky called across to the children. "Tell them we'll come to visit as soon as we can," said Winky. "Boy," said Tip, as he stroked the bird's sleek feathers, "I can hardly wait to take a trip back to Trash City on our wonderful big black bird." "Croak," said Sable, as she wheeled in the sky over the Big Valley and headed for home. So that's the end of chapter 14. They finally did it. They made it home. So now we have the very final portion of our book called the epilogue. Remember, our book started with the prologue, so we're going to end with our epilogue, which is the very final section. "The end," said Uncle Nick as he closed the book. "I wrote the story as I remembered it." Tom and Lucy clapped their hands. "Not so loud, children," whispered Mrs. Little. "Baby Betsy is sound asleep." I'm sure she was listening. Babies do know more than we think. And of course, I did tell Mr. Penny and Mayor Clutter that Winky and Tip found their parents, said Cousin Dinky. They were very surprised, but the children in the home weren't. They said they knew it all along. Well, I was astounded, said Uncle Nick. You mean because the big bird was flying the small fries around the big valley, asked Mr. Little. No, said Uncle Nick, because I didn't think our dreams and imagination could solve problems when they most certainly can. Amen, said Mr. Little, and amen. The end. We finished The Littles and the Lost Children. The children are no longer lost. They found their way home. And it looks like your imaginations and your dreams can help you solve some problems. So I want to thank all of our guest readers that we have had throughout this entire school closure who have helped out and read pages from all of the chapters in all of our books. You guys have been awesome, and you've made it a lot of fun for our crew in A23. My A23 kids, you guys have one final assignment for the littles in our Google Classroom, so make sure you fill that out. And that's it. We're going to be starting a new thing next week, a little different than the littles. We'll be doing a lot more on Zoom together. So thank you guys so much for watching all of these videos. Thank you again, Dr. Gifford, for joining us in our final chapter. And I will talk to you guys soon. See you later.